welcome to our second workshop. My name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition Emotion. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, I'm so grateful to have you here for our second workshop. I am pumped for you to experience our guest speaker later on this evening. But before we get started, I want to touch up on a couple of quick points. So you are starting your mentor relationship. That is awesome. Hopefully you've had your first conversation. I'd love to learn about it. Post maybe about some of the key talking points that you've had for your first meeting in the comment section. Would love to learn about how that first meeting has gone. But yeah, this workshop's all about how to network in a genuine way and really make the most out of it. This workshop should be about an hour long. As a reminder, I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Once we have asked those questions, I'll expect you to answer them. That's how you get credit for participating and being here at the workshops. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker tonight. I'm really excited to dive into this. Now, this is what's really key. I mean, genuine networking is such a pivotal component to building rapport, to getting job offers, to getting promotions. Really, if you can hone this skill, if you can hone this ability, you will be set professionally, because ultimately, at the end of the day, your hard skills, that being your ability to crunch numbers, to do some form of engineering, to do some form of science, like all those things are pretty good. They're very easy to measure. So it's very clear whether or not you are better or worse than somebody on a hard skill. But your soft skills are much more difficult to measure. But those soft skills are really what's going to set you apart. I mean, as they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And this is the workshop about how you can know more people and have a stronger bond with them, because then it goes to your reputation. Because if you have a reputation for treating people like garbage, you're not going to have a great reputation. People are going to want to help connect you with other people. If you come in with low energy, if you come in with a bad state, if you come in talking trash about other people, you're not going to put yourself in a good position. And so I want to be very clear. When it comes to networking, when it comes to building a relationship, it is not all about the transaction. If you're coming into a networking situation, you're thinking to yourself, what is in it for me? You are not going to have a positive outcome. I promise you on that. I really want to be clear. It's not all about landing the job or the internship. Sometimes it's about building the relationship and then playing the long game, because ultimately that may turn into an opportunity because they built a rapport with you. But if you burn them, or if you make them feel like you are using them to get to a location that you would like to be, they can smell that on you. They can smell it from a mile away. And that is not great. As they say, desperation reeks. You do not want to be desperate. You don't want to be perceived as someone that's a user or a taker. You want to be a giver. You want to be someone who gives energy to relationships. The first place to start is being genuine with how you talk to people and how you build rapport with people. Now, this is something we talked about last time, but it is so important, and that is the 3 keys to success in this program. That is honing your strategy, your story, and your state. As we've said before, your state is most important. So physically, how are you? Physically, what is going on with your world? Physically, I don't care what is happening. If you recently broke up with your significant other, if your dog just died, if you got some bad news, I don't care what's going on. If you get up, if you shake it out, if you let it loose, you will get yourself into a positive state. So I want to challenge you to do that right now. I want you to get up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it out, let it loose, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're releasing blood to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for retaining information. If you're just sitting there on a couch or in a chair in a slumped over position, your likelihood of retaining any of the information we talk about tonight is severely diminished. But if you come in standing up, moving around, getting your blood flowing, you are much more likely to retain this information. Have you ever found it difficult in a classroom setting to remember what your professor says if you've been sitting for 3 hours? That's why 3-hour lectures really struggle to work. They're not very effective because people are not moving around. Your brain needs blood to retain information. So get up, get moving, get out, get loose. Now, the second key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you will or will not be successful? I promise you right now, you will achieve up to the goals that you set for yourself in life and no higher. So you might as well shoot for the stars and land on the moon than shoot for the moon and end up in nowhere. Because if you are not focused about where you want to be, or really having a big, hairy, crazy, audacious goal for yourself, what are you doing? Like, are you just saying to yourself, like, I'm cool with winding up short, with, settling down and just settling for everything in my life? If that's the case, this program's not for you. I can tell you that right now. This program's not for you if you're trying to settle. But if you're someone that wants to go for it, if you want to go big, if you want to go out there for the opportunities that you want to see in your life, this program is absolutely for you. Let this program be a springboard. Let your mentor be a Sherpa that's guiding you up this mountain of life and success and help you get to where you want to be. This is someone who wants to guide you, that wants to help you. They wouldn't have signed up for this program if they weren't interested in seeing you succeed. So I want to be very clear with you. What is the story for why you will be successful? Understand that, hone it, be prepared. In fact, I would challenge you to write this down. Write it on a piece of paper. It's more likely to stick in your mind if you write it on a piece of paper of where you want to be. Stick it up on your wall. Stick it up on your desk. Stick it up on your dresser. Stick it up on your mirror. Something that's going to remind you of where you want to be in 1 month, 3 months, 1 year from now. That will help you set the target of where you want to go. Because if you don't set these goals, you're going to be on a path that's got really no clear outcome of where you want to go. So the last part is your strategy. What are you going to do to set yourself apart? Now, when it comes to strategies, I'm a big believer in routines. When I say routines, I mean literally getting into a daily habit that you can practice regularly so then you can be better at a skill. We think about habits sometimes in a negative light because we think about people just being addicted to bad actions, but I believe that habits can also be attributed in a positive light as well. What is a positive habit you can get into to help you build more genuine relationships? I believe one thing you can do is to be intentional about having an informational interview every single week with a new person, with a new professional in your field. You can leverage LinkedIn. You could go to a professor's office hours. You could talk to a friend of yours whose parent works in the field that you're interested in working towards, or a family friend that you know works in the field that you're interested in working towards. If you set up one informational interview every single week, and by an informational interview, I want to be very clear. This is a conversation. This isn't an interview. You're not trying to get a job from this person. You're just trying to get knowledge about what this work is like. Set up one of those a week. I can promise you they're going to start making introductions for you. They're going to start helping you get to where you want to be. By the way, if your goals change over time, that's okay. That's totally okay. You can share with them how your goals have changed. They're going to want to keep helping you over time. I'll give you a perfect example of this. As an entrepreneur, I set goals all the time. I have a board of mentors. I literally have about 50 to 100 mentors that I send once every 3 months an update of what's going on with the business. Here's the thing though, I've pivoted this business many, many times. Now, initially when I first got started, I was thinking to myself like, oh, well, they're my mentors. Like, if I tell them that I've pivoted, will they think I'm a total failure? Will they not want to help me anymore? What I found is that is absolutely not the case. They're always there to support me. Mentors that have been with me for 5+ years still give me guidance, still help make introductions, still help me out and support me as my mission has grown, as my goals have grown. That is the nature of mentoring relationships. That is the nature of relationships in general. You should keep your network up to date with what is going on in your world because they will want to see you succeed. But the key is that you ask them for something specific. When I meet with my mentors or when I send them an email, I ask for something very, very specific. I don't say, hey, if you know anybody in XYZ space, if you could introduce me, would love that. Why? Because it's not at the top of their mind. What I'll do is I'll physically go onto their LinkedIn profile, look at who they're connected with and say, hey, I noticed that you're connected with Jane Doe, John Doe, Shelby Doe, and Jenny Doe. I know that you may not be connected with all 4 of those people, but if you are connected with one of them, would you mind introducing me? Here's an email template that you could copy and paste to introduce me. Now I've made it extremely specific and easy for them to take an action step to help me out. And that is how you can continue to grow your relationships, your network, and build rapport with people. And just keep them in the loop of what's going on in your world. So I just want to be very clear. It's about building genuine relationships. And it's about when you're building those genuine relationships and then you're asking them for introductions or connecting with more people through those relationships, being very specific and making it as easy as possible for them to help you out. I really want to stress this. It's so important. Genuine networking. If you can take anything from this whole program, if it's genuine networking, and by genuine networking, I mean really listening, taking an active and keen interest in who you are speaking with, you are going to be set. You're going to be in a great position. Because at the end of the day, it's not your elevator pitch. It's not going to be anything about you that makes someone interested in you. It's going to be about your ability to listen to them. In fact, I can tell you multiple times where I didn't say a word in a conversation. I just nodded my head yes and asked questions about things that somebody else has said. And at the end of the conversation, whether that be 30 minutes or 60 minutes long, they said, man, Garrett, you are such a great conversationalist. Or, gosh, I feel like I just had such a great conversation with you. And the funniest thing about it is I didn't actually say a word. The point is this: people love to talk about themselves Why? Because people are really interested in things that they're interested in. People wouldn't choose to spend the time that they have on this earth in the way that they did unless they thought it was the most optimum way of spending their time. Therefore, things that interest them, things that they choose to spend their time on, are things that interest them and ultimately make you interesting to them because you've taken an interest in those actions and activities. I hope that makes sense. If you want to rewatch that, take that back 30 seconds because I think it's really important. People ultimately, at the end of the day, people care about themselves. People care about things that they are interested in because they've chosen to spend the time that they have on those tasks. So with that said, I'm excited to jump in to our guest speaker this evening. Really, the whole point of this workshop is about genuine networking. By the way, if you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'll add you to our LinkedIn group where we discuss different topics, and just you can add different topics, ask any questions, and expand us to our entire Ambition in Motion network. Connect with me. I'll add you to the group. But yeah, I'm so excited to get started. Let's jump into our guest speaker this evening. Welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to talk about how we can network in a genuine way. I mean, right now, it's coronavirus, it's COVID. We got a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, and ultimately, it's up to us to put ourselves out there, not in a transactional way, but in a genuine way. Because ultimately, if we're going to get that job offer, we're going to get that internship offer, if we're going to stand out from the crowd, it's going to be about the relationships we build and the way that we treat people is really, it's going to be what sets us apart. We've got an incredible guest with us here this evening. We've got Mark Zukerman. Mark, I'm so excited to learn your story and share more about you. But Mark is the founding principal of Encore Sotheby's International Realty. Mark has an incredible story of entrepreneurship and the power of how genuine networking and relationships can propel you forward professionally. Mark, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Garrett. I'm excited to share my story and to hopefully provide some value for some people along the way.
I would love that. I know I gave like a brief overview of you, but I'd love if you could share with our audience a little bit of how you got to this type of work that you're doing with Encore Sotheby's. I'd love, if you could share that story up to this point. But one thing I always find so fascinating when chatting with you is just like risk profiles and understanding of like when the right decision is to take the right step for which type of person and your risk profile. I think that's really relevant, but also detailing the relationships you've had up to this point that have helped propel you to where you're at today with the business.
Sure, I'm happy to go back as far as you'd like. My story to where I am today is nothing that I would have ever imagined, along the way. Like I think back to my times at Indiana, and I was in the Kelly School, although I think I was there before it was named the Kelly School. When I graduated in 1985, the real estate world, both development and brokerage, where I'm fully immersed in today, was not even on my radar. I came out of Kelly, and I, like a lot of folks, interviewed it for positions within something that I thought I was interested in, and at the time you're, 22 or 23 years old. And, my interest lied in, in becoming a merchant, a business person, a retailer, kind of then. And I was lucky enough to, to garner, I think 5 or 6 different, offers from the business placement office, at Kelly. And ultimately, that led me to going into the executive training program at Rich's department store in Atlanta, which was part of Federated Department Stores. And I worked my way up there over a very short period of time to be, after the training program, to being the assistant stereo buyer. So I was buying stereos, cool job in Atlanta, for a 22 or 23-year-old kid. And, then I got my first review, an excellent review, and I got a very small, I got a nice raise, but from a very small number. I always say, hey, this percentage of nothing is nothing, so no matter what the review is. So I came home, for the holidays, was with my folks, and was over at a friend of mine's house whose father was a pretty prominent real estate developer in Indianapolis, and shared that story with him. And before I left his house that night, he had offered me a job. He said, hey, I understand what you're talking about. You did. I know who you are. I've watched you kind of grow up. I understand the type of person that you are. And at that point, the raise was about a 50% raise, from what I was earning in Atlanta. And when I look back at it, when you asked me, hey, could we talk about, networking? When I really look back at that, in retrospect, that was my first networking contact that led to anything. When you think about it that way, this was work I had done for, this organization, for this, guy. When I was a kid, I started working, for him, sweeping streets and moving bushes and cleaning up construction debris. But I had a good work ethic, and I think it was meaningful, to him. And then I went away to college and, to business school. When I was back at his house sharing a pizza, one night over the holidays, explained to him what I was. I think he jumped at the opportunity to add the right person, to his, company. And that was the first thought that I ever had, about the quote unquote real estate business. And then through the genesis of a lot of things, I was with him for 7 or 8 years, and he reached a more mature, part of his business cycle where he wasn't going to be doing a bunch of new projects, and he was going to kind of segue into building, very expensive, beautiful homes. Never wanted to be a home builder, it was never in me. And I used that opportunity, when I was 29 or 30, to then, just kind of roll out and start my own development and marketing firm that ultimately led in 2010 to us bringing the Sotheby's International Realty franchise, to all of Indiana. So that's what we're doing today. But that was kind of the genesis of what led to it. It wasn't anything that was a deliberate path. It was more the coming together of a bunch of different opportunities that, when you think about it, were all part of networking. And I'm happy to break down each one of those. There's, we could, I think you mentioned that we are on kind of a timeline. I get pretty passionate about this. I could talk to you till midnight and probably still keep going. So you guide the conversation, and I'm happy to take you through any of those things.
Yeah, I love it. I love the story of, I love what you said when you were thinking to yourself, I came home, I had some pizza over the holidays, and you mentioned that this was the first kind of networking contact that really led to anything meaningful. What I guess one thing I think is really critical to kind of pull out, like if I'm a student hearing this, I might be thinking to myself, one way might be thinking like, well, shoot, how am I supposed to be lucky enough to be eating pizza with the guy who's going to end up hiring me later on? That is one thought you could have. But I think the alternative thought is, and really probably the more important thought was, it's kind of like the notion of success. It's like when preparation meets opportunity, that's when success is, when success hits. So for you, what were the steps that led up to potentially you networking with other people, practicing building genuine relationships with people that got you to the point where when you met with your friend's dad, when you were eating pizza over the holidays, that you were in a position, equipped, prepared for taking on that opportunity,
right?
Versus it being the very first time you've ever networked in your life.
Right. So I think you're right. Like, you hit on something that I say a lot, or I look back on things a lot and say, okay, luck is really just the crossroads of opportunity and preparedness, right? So somebody can say, oh, you're lucky you had that pizza, with this guy, and and you were so fortunate. Having said that, I shared my experience with more than just him, about what was going on in Atlanta. I was working for Riches and those other things. And I think when you break things down into the, with a networking, mentality, those of us that are in sales or that are networking constantly to, make our experiences, better, or even when you look at it, say, okay, how can we make somebody else's experience better because we're part of it? I think that's always the way that I've always tried to look at interaction. Like, I've never looked at it and say, okay, what could this mean specifically to Mark? Like in our relationship, Garrett, I would say, okay, what could Mark bring to the relationship that would make Garrett better because he knows Mark, And I think if you look at things selfishly and say, okay, what can I do so that it only benefits me? Those people that are more mature in their business cycles will see through that. Like, that's a very flimsy, basis to build any relationship on. Like, I would always want to be the guy that, is giving maybe more than I receive, in that result, because I think that if I do that correctly, I'll be receiving a lot more than what I think I might have received anyway. And I probably am getting it in a way that is not self-serving at all, which is a really great baseline for that networking, relationship. When you talk about networking, it's like this buzzword to say, okay, what'd you do to network there? Well, I think you just be yourself. Like, I think you put yourself out there and you interact with people in such a way that they understand who you are. And I don't mean your name and your address and your phone number. Like, they understand who you are and the things that you're good at, the things that you might be able to provide, value in a relationship. The networking, the whole basis for the networking value proposition is the relationship that exists beyond it. For instance, if this guy might have said to me, hey, we're not hiring anybody. If you're really unhappy with what's going on, here's 2 other people that I know that maybe you should have a conversation with if you're thinking about making a change, and you'd be open-minded about moving back to Indianapolis from, Atlanta. When I grew up in Indianapolis, I always swore I would leave, like I would never live here. It was a different place in 76 to 81, when I was in my formative kind of years, no downtown redevelopment, it was a different place. Today, it's one of the best places to live and raise your family that you could ever, consider. And that's one of the reasons why we've had so much success, by bringing Sotheby's, here on the real estate, residential real estate component. Going back to the networking thing, it would not have surprised me if he'd have said, hey, here's 2 other people, or here's 3 other people. In fact, Garrett, when I left him, after I had the discussion with him and said, hey, you're coming up on X amount, like you're X old. I said, take me through what your next 10 years are going to be like. Like, what are the things that you're going to be doing in the next 10 years? I was 29, I think, at the time, because I wanted to understand, if I stayed and doubled down on my experience with him, what other things I might be exposed to, projects, processes, personnel, like who are the people that were going to be around that in the next 10 years. When he had the discussion, I said, hey, I really want to go in this direction. That wasn't a direction that interests me. So I had built up rapport, and most importantly, trust. I know that's something I want to talk with you about later on when you talk about being vulnerable, but I had built up this trust with this guy and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. And he said, okay, what you're about to embark on is more risk. Like, it's very a risky curve for your arc. It's not a risk averse curve. And hey, here's the people that I think you should align yourself with an engineer, a lawyer, an accountant, and they were all his people. They were all people that I was going to be in my 30s. They were all people that were in their 60s, right? And I always thought, well, if I'm going to really network and build my own personal board of directors that I could bring with me that would help me to grow through business, those couldn't be people that when I'm 30 would be 60, because when I need them when I'm 50, they would be 75 or 80, like they'd be living in Arizona or playing golf in Florida and not as willing a participant, in the interaction. So I kind of went out and used those networking opportunities that he gave me to network to find my own guys. So I found like in the accounting firm, I found a young guy in the accounting firm who was a few years older than me. He subsequently went on to become the managing partner of the firm, and they're a big firm. And today he's still my guy. I'm 57, he's 60. And so at the end of the day, I was able to do those types of things, but it wasn't anything really deliberate. Like, I think it was more putting myself out there, willing to share, willing to understand that it has to be a two-way street, right? And even the value preposition doesn't have to be something that you're providing value, like immediately. Because if you're coming out of school, you might think, okay, how do I do that? But it's really more of a long-term network. Like, you're not going to build the network, have one interaction with them, and turn your back on them for the rest of your career. Like, it'll be something that evolves and goes on, forever. And that's the beauty of it, if you choose, correctly, and you're able to develop that, rapport.
I think that's a really interesting and a really great point, because I was just about to ask, what can students do when they feel like, maybe I'm so early in my career? What could I possibly offer? How could I bring value to somebody else? Sometimes with what I've observed is just taking a genuine, keen interest in them and their story. People love to talk about themselves.
That's all it is. Ask questions, be a good listener, understand what it is. I will say this, and this is coming, firsthand from me. And I think, my daughter's a, Kelly, grad, she's, 23, and as, coming through, school, there are times where I would talk to her and she would listen. And then she said, well, Dad, what if you looked at things this way now, and it's a 35, it's a 35-year difference in age. Like, so I could be missing something. Like, I'm not fresh out of school. I'm not interacting with the same sphere that a 23-year-old's interacting with. I don't look at the world, through the same lens. And it would be a ton of value for me within my company if I had a better perspective on some of those things from a different point of view, a younger point of view, somebody coming out of school's point of view. It would be incumbent upon me to really listen, filter that through my process so that I can understand what that might mean to my company and everybody that works in it. And I think if you're fostering that relationship, the right way, that student coming out, if they put themselves out there and they offer to provide perspective, be prepared to provide perspective. Like, don't throw it out there and say, hey, if I could ever help with anything, if you'd like to understand something, how somebody in my generation might look at things, or our generation might look at things. I think that's a fair way to provide perspective. Whether that person that you're talking with will take that, and run with it or dismiss it offhand, you don't know. But I don't think you should presuppose that they're just going to dismiss it, because I don't think that they will. Like, I think a good leader will listen and filter those things so that they can maybe better understand how that could be help to what they're trying to do every day. Like every day I come to work and I think, okay, like, how do I make this place better for everybody that works here? I have 55 agents that work for me. I have a support staff of 10. And if I do what I do correctly, the tide should, rise for everybody in the company, and everybody that's part of it should benefit from the fact that it's getting better for them, for the company, in that sense. If I could take a little, piece out of, I'll use a low hanging fruit in my business, and it's something that my generation, is good at, but not nearly as good as the younger generation. Let's talk about social media. Like, I've surrounded myself around some great social media people that are not, that are not my age, that are not part of my, experience out of business school. I mean, Garrett, this sounds funny, but when I took, K201 in Bloomington, it was Fortran. Like, I did punch cards, like the PC wasn't even invented yet, So we've gone through a lot of things. Like, nobody would have ever thought, that you'd have, this, and you take it with you everywhere you go. I traveled around Europe after I graduated, called my parents once a week, every Sunday. They had no idea where I was from Sunday to Sunday, and now my kids, I know where they are at every, it can be kind of freaky, but there's a lot that we don't know, is what I'm saying. So I think there's all different kinds of ways to create value. I wouldn't go into any relationship or any interaction with some predetermined way to do that. But I think it just comes out of conversation. It comes out of maybe some commonality of interests. I think it should be conversational in that sense. And the only way to really get good at that, you're not born like that. Like, nobody knows how to do that. You just do it a lot. You practice. Some of the interactions are going to be great and some of them aren't, right? And then you learn from the ones that are both great and maybe more importantly, the ones that aren't. And you just keep getting, better at it, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question, post in the comment section. But what are go-to questions you like to ask people, just so then you can get to know them on a deeper level? Post in the comment section. We'd love to learn about it. I think this is a great exercise because it can allow the students to learn about what other go-to questions other students have. So post in the comment section. Want to learn about it. What are the go-to questions you ask to get to know somebody on a deeper level? So Mark, I'd love to ask you the question, what is your why? Why do you do the work? What drives you to keep progressing forward with the work that you're doing? What motivates you to keep wanting to learn more?
Yeah, well, so my take on this is very simple. Like, I think you get one lap around the track, right, in your life. And I think that you want to make that the most exciting, interesting lap that you can take. And it may sound cliche, but every day, if I go home and look in the mirror and I like what is looking back, and I feel like, okay, I had a good day. So I don't have a why. Like, I don't want to be the richest guy in the world. That's never, ever motivated me. I don't want to be the most important guy in the world. Like the development company that I had when I did, I've developed the 3 most expensive neighborhoods in Indianapolis. It wasn't Zukerman Development. The company isn't called Zukerman Sotheby's International Realty. I never had, it was never an ego or a, monetary thing that drove me to be that, drove me to continue to do what I do. Now, I like the byproduct of the success. Like, I like the things that it has enabled me to do, but that wasn't, the why. So if we go back to that, I think that I have tried to create this really great, company that is built off of integrity and purpose. And that's what I wanted. Most of the reason that I did it was so that my kids would understand the type of people that I would want them, to become as they, get older and more mature in either their business or professional lives. In my opinion, that's the most important thing that we do. Like, we raise our families. That's the legacy. Nobody necessarily may remember how much money you have in your bank account, but they sure know your kids, in that sense, and the legacy, that you leave there. So every day I get up and think, hey, how can I make this place better? How can I surround myself with the right people? And how can I take the 58 people that I just mentioned, agents and support staff, or 65 or whatever the number is, and know that they're secure in my leadership, allowing them to, make a living, take care of their families. And so it's for me, the motivation is more to take care of the community that relies on me. And I mean that through my family, and my business. And the byproducts that come along with that, I like the reputation that we've earned in the business community, locally, regionally, maybe even nationally within the Sotheby's, franchise, like the success that we've had both in our sales numbers and economically in the money, that we've earned. But the thing that I'm the most proud of is the fact that, I have people that rely on me, that we've come through for every day. And we are not a revolving door. Like, we don't have a bunch of people leaving our company. To me, that's what kind of motivates me, every day. And that may be a different answer, Garrett, than you get from some other people, that talk about, oh, I wanted to have this, I want to have that. I always looked at, if I could provide the baseline, those other things would follow naturally, if we were doing things the right way. So hopefully that answered the question, because it isn't like I didn't do it because I wanted to make $1 million a year. I didn't do it because I wanted to have the biggest real estate company in the world. I did it for much more, maybe internal, kind of reasons.
Well, it's funny you say that. It's a very Dale Carnegie response. Especially it's not Zukerman's Encore Sotheby's, or it's not your name in front of it.
Nah.
And the reason why that's such a Dale Carnegie response is because, and this is for the students that have not read Dale Carnegie's book before. By the way, if you've not read Dale Carnegie's work, I highly recommend it. He wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Big fan of that. But one of the stories he talks about in it was this idea of, there was this business negotiation, and Dale was representing this one company, and there was another company I was being represented at the time as well. And they needed to make the numbers work financially. And it was really, it didn't know if they were going to be able to make it work. And one of the things that Dale Carnegie ended up conceding on was, when they had asked, well, what are we going to call this joint conglomerate venture that we're going to create? And Dale said, well, obviously we're going to call it your name, or your company's name. And that's what sealed the deal. It's just by giving up the need to have your name stamped on the billboard was, for some people it's a massive ego boost. For other people, it's not as important. And in reality, it helps build and mend genuine relationships between people that need to potentially have those sorts of things. So I think that's a really great response. I'd love if you could share a story. I don't know if you have any stories like this of just perhaps I know the story of when you started Encore Sotheby's. It was right during the recession. I mean, this was right in the difficult, the teeth of a very difficult time period to be in real estate. I would imagine that there were a lot of relationships that you leaned on during that time period that really helped propel you to where you're at today. Could you share with us a story of just a time that you had someone who really stepped up for you when it was difficult to be in real estate?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. I think we look back on it, we were awarded the franchise in the middle of 2009 with the idea that we would open in January of 2010. And in hindsight, that may have been the worst time to open a luxury real estate company. Those of us that had experienced the downturn, we knew it was going on. We didn't know how long it would last. We didn't know how deep it was gonna become. Now if somebody says, "Oh, I saw it coming and I knew it was gonna last this long," I don't think they'd be telling you the truth. Nobody saw it, right? Nobody knew how long it was going to be. But when you make an entrepreneurial decision and you when you are an entrepreneur, I think most of what you do is manage risk, right? Like that's the balance. All you're doing is managing risk. It doesn't matter if you're building a building or if you're opening a real estate company or if you're, planting, a crop in the field. You're just managing your risk about how much you want to plant or how big a bite you want to take out of the deal. And in hindsight, that was the worst time. So we opened in January 2010. We had no agents. Like we weren't ABC Brokerage that just became ABC Sotheby's. We were a true startup. So we did rely on a lot of our existing relationships to be able to help us build the foundation for what we might, have grown on. And those were both our professional relationships with our lawyers and our accountants, also relationships, however, with our bankers. And one of the relationships that we leveraged a lot at the beginning was our relationship with the lenders at those banks. So if we were going to get into the residential real estate business, we said, okay, a brokerage business, we'd say, okay, where could we get business from? Like because if we just thought, okay, we're going to go around and we're going to, the difficult thing in the residential real estate business is that it's likely that somebody knows 3 or 4 residential real estate brokers just offhand. Either their aunt is a broker or their next door neighbor's brother. It's that they know somebody. So in order to try to create some volume for us early on, we did leverage some of those relationships that would allow us to go back to the people that we did business with before we actually opened up into the brokerage world. Now, a lot of the people that we had relationships with, some of the dirt working guys, some of the engineering crews, when we developed real estate from 2000, let's say, to 2007, a lot of those guys were out of business, Garrett, like that was a really difficult time. I know more guys that were in the development business that didn't make it through to the other side than did, actually, especially the smaller guy, like not the publicly traded developers or the real estate investment trusts, who had larger pockets to get through the downturn. So we leveraged those relationships, and then we leveraged the relationships of those relationships. And you might say, well, what does that mean? So what I asked basically at the beginning was, I might have said to that residential real estate lender, hey, where's the source of most of your business? Like, we'd like to be a source. We'd like you to refer in. And then they would say, well, we have a great relationship with this insurance guy. He refers a lot of business to him. So I said, could you introduce me to that insurance guy? Let me go and have a conversation with them. Do you feel comfortable, making that introduction? Because I would never take it for granted, that they would. So I looked at leveraging that relationship in that manner. The other thing that I asked those guys is I said, hey, you understand what we're trying to do. You know who we are. And by that, I mean, not that we're Sotheby's, you know who we are, like who we are, the leaders. Are there agents that you think might get our mentality that would resonate, that with what we're trying to build would resonate with them, both as a brand, as a marketing force? Because I think what we've built is a really great marketing company that just happens to sell homes. So we've looked at it a different way than maybe the more traditional real estate guy. And then I asked that lender to say, okay, who are those agents? Like, maybe I should be talking to those agents because maybe I'd like for them to come to work for me. So I was able to look at ways to maybe take a relationship and look at how that relationship could help me maybe in 2 separate ways. Like, one is the ultimate consumer, but one was also the agent, that if I had more agents working for me, obviously that we would sell more homes. So I think you always have to look at that relationship and say, okay, what can I garner out of this? And then, as I mentioned earlier, what could I give back, right? So my give back to that insurance guy or my give back to that mortgage guy is anybody that you give to me, those will be clients that will, that we will bring back to you to do the lending. That will be clients we bring back to you to write their homeowners, insurance. And so it just kind of, it can snowball if you create this 2-way street where if you're doing something for somebody else, they're the first people that would introduce you to the next level of service providers for 2 reasons. One, it could lead to additional business for them. But the second thing, which is not a monetary thing, is that they look good. Like, I think guys like to be able to refer somebody. And then when the job comes off, say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that referral. It was unbelievable. Like, that's the best way that you could provide them value in the relationship, is to make them look great. And all you're doing is your job anyway.
I love that. I think that's a really great notion. I think I want to, for students that are maybe not an entrepreneur quite yet, I'm going to create some applicable kind of diagonal into this.
Okay.
I think as a student, when you're looking at this, you might think, oh, well, I'm not, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be an entrepreneur, or at least not quite yet. But this can apply to anything that's going on with your world. And if someone says, hey, I was hoping to connect with XYZ type of person, do you know of anybody who's in that area? If you can make a referral, that's huge. I mean, one of the greatest benefits, one of the greatest joys I get is from connecting people together through mentorship. That's because it's my job, but if magical things can happen from that, that's incredible. I get the glory of being able to put two people together and they get to just have an amazing experience and learn from each other. I think a really great story that kind of exemplifies this is, it makes me think of Ed Catmull. He's the guy, one of the co-founders of Pixar. And back in the day, before he had started working for essentially before he created Pixar, he was working for Lucasfilm. And he was applying for Lucasfilm. It was after they came out with Star Wars. They were the very first movie kind of studio to have like a technical component to what they do in terms of like 3D graphic design, kind of computer created, graphics and stuff like that. And in the interview process, they had asked him, do you know of anybody else who might be a good fit for this role? And Ed ended up listing off all 30 of his fellow University of Utah classmates who were in this really prestigious graphic design kind of school / learning, which was way ahead of its time. While everybody else they interviewed recommended nobody. He ended up getting the job. Merely because he was so confident in his abilities, he was willing to recommend everybody else, while they weren't willing to recommend him or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah. That's a terrific story, and that speaks volumes to the relationship he has with those people, that he felt comfortable enough to put that out there.
Yeah, and the other thing I love that you talked about was the willingness to ask. Like, there's that fine line between wanting to be conscientious, wanting to be helpful to other people. But the other side is literally asking. Like, if we don't ask for what we want, if we're not clear and specific about what we're seeking to achieve or attain or acquire, we are not going to achieve that. It's not going to magically show up at our door one day. We have to be very clear and very specific about what we want. And so I love how when you were in this, when you're talking about building this business and building these relationships with all these different people, with growing Encore Sotheby's, you were very specific about who you wanted to meet with, and you had built genuine bonds with people that helped those relationships form, which I think is just awesome.
Well, relationship, it's the most powerful. It's the most powerful, potion, I think, for success. I think everybody, and some of the stuff that you and I have talked about over the course of the last 6 months, Garrett. When you think about are there guys that might be better, technically, with a balance sheet, or, I think I once told you, and I was only partially kidding, that I would tell my accounting, experts, hey, don't tell me if it's a debit or credit. Tell me if I'm adding or subtracting. Like the A201 thing and A202 wasn't my strongest suit, but I embrace that. Like, I know that, and I'm comfortable in my own skin. Like, I'm okay telling somebody, hey, it's not the accounting part of things is not my, say, strongest suit. So what does that mean? I surround myself with people that it is their strongest suit, like there's value, in that relationship. And I think asking questions when you're young is an incredibly important thing to do. Okay. And I know it's a cliche to say, hey, somebody who told me once there's no such thing as a stupid question. And there were a lot of us that, that might have, embrace that. I think that for me, I love it when I get asked, questions, and it gives me the opportunity to maybe explain something in a way that I wouldn't have thought that I would have needed to explain it, or that I should have explained it, and it gives me a chance to really ask a follow-up question as to, did I present it in the right way? Because the next time I want to be, better, like my next time that I do this, I want to learn something from this time, in doing it. Otherwise, I'm not really being true to, kind of my why. Like, I want to be the best that I could potentially be. That's my why. So when you when you ask those questions, I think that you can ask, the right question to the right person. And then you might, if you were to ask me, hey, how do you know what it'll be? You don't. Like, I don't think that you know whether that was the right question to ask this guy, or that guy. But if that's something that you want to learn, then I think you ask the question. And I think that, it could be as simple as, hey, is there anything that I could do, that could give you insight into, my world or the things that I'm doing? There's all different kinds of ways, to build rapport. But I found that guys like me, or maybe, heads of companies, let's say, at the end of the day, they're still proud of what they've done. They're proud of their families. They're proud of the things that they, do. They're proud of their, their hobbies. I mean, look, I've asked a lot of guys, what it was like to ski, a black diamond, run, in Aspen. And I've never worn skis in my life. Like, my next time skiing will be my first time skiing. I've been to Aspen, 15 times in the summer, but I've never gone there for them. But it doesn't mean that I don't show a genuine interest in it. Like I'm always learning, especially the athletic part of me. Like, that's you find that commonality, and you can ask questions that would lead to building rapport. And in essence, really, I think you're interviewing without it being an interview. Like, you're just asking those questions to foster, it's all conversational, right? You find something that you have commonality in, and, that's the reason to maybe reach back out, within your network, where you're providing value for both things. It could be as simple as saying, hey, did you see that, did you see that double play that the Cubs turned last night? It's as simple as that. And it's just a way to reach out and network.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's finding those areas to bridge that connects people is so powerful. But I'd love to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comment section, what specifically would you like to accomplish from your network? Like, who do you want to meet with? What would you like to achieve? Where would you like to be going? Something specific. So let's say if I'm a student wanting to get into investment banking, maybe I say, hey, I want to meet with a junior investment banker at JP Morgan. I don't know. Maybe you are a mechanical engineering student. You think, I want to meet with a mechanical engineer within the construction industry. It could be something, just essentially, what are you trying to, who are the types of people you'd like to be connecting with? What is something specific that you would like to achieve from your network? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. This is a great exercise in practicing specificity and just being very explicit about exactly what you're looking for. Because the broader you go, the less likely you are to get what you want. But the more specific you are, you are much more likely to get something from that.
Yeah, Garrett, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think if you look at it out of that lens, it can be very, very powerful, right? And so the 6 or 7 years I spent with the guy after I came back, a couple of great things happened. He taught me a lot about his business, and he taught me what I wanted to do. Like, that's really, really great, right? But more importantly, he taught me what I didn't want to do. Like, how powerful is that? He taught me that I didn't want to be a home builder. He taught me I didn't want to go into that other line of work that it might have gone down. And I knew that early on. It wasn't an epiphany after 7 years. I learned it along the way, And then obviously, you don't know this, but the best thing that, happened out of that is I ended up marrying his niece, and I kid with him. He's 87 years old. I kid with him still to this day, that says, hey, I learned a lot from you, but the best thing that came out of my apprenticeship was that I, met my wife and I have 2 great kids, So you never know where, it might take you. You might learn something from that interaction that says, hey, I thought I wanted to do this, but I don't know that I do anymore. And that's powerful. You can put that to use any number of ways.
I love that. I think that's a great, man. I think we think so much about what we want to do, but we sometimes, if we're not consciously aware of what we don't want to do, we can sometimes fall back into bad habits or bad places. So I guess I'd love to ask the students another question. What do you know you for sure do not want to do? Just based on your life experiences that you've had up to this point, whether that be part-time jobs or internships you've had, or classes you've taken, or projects you've worked on, or volunteer experiences you've had. What do you know for sure that you do not want to do based on those experiences? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. Mark, this has been an awesome workshop. I think students have really gotten a lot. Just thinking about, I love the entrepreneurial lens that you brought to the table here for this, because there's so much that I think we cover when it comes to professional development and students landing that first job or internship, but realizing that the application to being an entrepreneur is very palpable and very relevant. I guess really what I'm trying to say is that entrepreneurship is not this crazy mythical career path that only the select few can pursue, and they've got very little application to what a normal professional career is like. That's not the case at all. I think you've done a really great job of taking your entrepreneurial path, being able to show that there are skills and things that you've developed because of your ability to be a great entrepreneur that really you built and developed through you pursuing your own professional career path.
I think, look, when I was in school, and again, it was a long time ago in the early 80s, there was no entrepreneurship major. There were no entrepreneurship classes. You got through, your accounting and finance and production, and, then you found something you were interested in. And for me, it was marketing. And, I took the 300 and 400 level courses of those and set out, to get a job. And along the way, I learned things about different functions, but most importantly, I learned things about myself, Garrett. Like those were the things that along the way I learned, okay, this is something that I enjoy doing, or this is something that I'm very good at doing, or this is the type of interaction that I, enjoy having. And then what I think I've been lucky enough to be able to do is to cobble all of that stuff together and to put myself in a position where I can do the things that I enjoy doing every day with the tasks that I like to do every day around a bunch of people that I enjoy being around every day. And when I balled all that together, it was pretty powerful. I said, okay, this is what I would want to do. Now, that doesn't mean that it was always, the easiest, path. It certainly was not A, B, C. It was this. I mean, it wasn't this, but it also wasn't a straight line, right? And so at the end of the day, I think you say, okay, what can I take out of that interaction that I just had, whether it's a function in your job, whether it's an interaction that you just had with a person that is, at a certain positional aspect of a role that you might want to do. And you say, okay, in a simple way, could I see myself doing that? Would I be happy? Could I, like what I said earlier, could I look at myself at the mirror, in the mirror at the end of the day and like what I see, I'm looking back? Because, I know a ton of people that have made, a ton of money, but they're not necessarily the happiest people, in that sense. So I think you say, okay, what can I do so that I'm creating this right atmosphere for me, to live in, to continue to grow. The thing that's probably the most important thing for me, both personally and within my company, is that I give myself and everybody that's part of this company the opportunity to grow both professionally and personally. And I think there is such a crossover, between those two worlds. Like never do you, it'd be in a perfect world, you'd say, oh, I'm just leaving it at the office, and when I go home, it's just there, and I'm never going to mess with it. It never happens, right? On bad days, I go home, and Diana will say to me, boy, you're not in a great mood. What happened? And maybe, I give her the Cliff Note version of what happened. And if I don't want to talk about it, I'm just like, look, honey, I went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali and lost today. I'm not going to relive it at the dining room table, and that's an okay answer. I think you figure out, how to do that. But my point is that I don't think there's any one ingredient that leads you down the path. Like what you just said, you take stuff away from these different interactions, from these different functions, from these different tasks, and you learn, and it's okay. You ask questions and you learn, and you just keep evolving. Like I'm 57, I'll be 58. I don't think I'm done evolving, I'm excited to make a note of what it looks like now, and 5 or 10 years from now, look back and say, hey, look where I've evolved to. That kind of is what keeps me going. It would make things very boring if I didn't, look at it that way, and
no, I think that makes a ton of sense. So Mark, this was a great workshop. I think the students really got a lot out of what you had to say. I know I got a lot of what you had to say. I'd love to ask, how can our audience connect with you? I know a lot of our students are on LinkedIn. Are you all right if they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is fine. I'll let you post it, at the end of this, and people can reach out to me that way. LinkedIn's fine. Garrett, post my email address is fine too. That's fine either way. I I follow LinkedIn. I get there. It's not the easiest way for me to, interact. Email's a little easier, but I'm happy. The LinkedIn thing is fine. And please, anybody watching this, if there's anything that you think I might be able to provide you value with, or you want to pick my brain about anything, I am here to help. And as I mentioned, my kids are recent, graduates, and hopefully my son will get out of medical school next year, and then I won't have anybody left in school. But I'm happy to help, and I would enjoy helping. So please feel free to reach out.
That's awesome. Mark, thank you so much for being here. Students, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See you, everybody.